when I was around 14, 15 years old. I took a job as a dishwasher in a family-owned Greek restaurant. I joined the army in the US. I spent 3 years in Germany. I didn't do cooking. I was an engineer in the army there. But when I came back, I went to culinary school. And I was able to
Okay.
do that because the army paid my tuition, and I worked with Sodexo UK and Ireland. I was the senior executive development chef. I had this sort of itch to get back into being a chef again. So I left my corporate role doing concept innovation for Sodexo. I left the UK. I
Okay.
moved to southern Germany, and I became an executive head chef in a resort. And if anybody asked me, why did you leave corporate? I could say, you know why? Because I wanted to stay connected. I wanted to
Yeah.
understand what was still going on. I wanted to keep relevant.
What happens when you don't stop being a chef, but you stop working in restaurants? For a lot of chefs, leaving the kitchen feels like losing something. But what if it's actually the moment you redefine what cooking means? You're listening to Fugitive Chefs, a podcast about what happens when chefs step outside the traditional kitchen path. I'm Furkan, I've worked in kitchens like Noma and Mugaritz, and today I work outside kitchens as a senior innovation chef at Kraft Heinz. Some episodes are about new paths, new careers, new systems, but this one is a bit different. This one is about identity. Today I'm speaking with Stefan Loose. Stefan's journey is interesting because it doesn't really follow a clear exit from kitchens. Instead, it explores what happens when you keep cooking, but outside the structures that usually define it. And I think this is something a lot of chefs don't think about enough. Not just where you work, but why you cook in the first place. So, Stefan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us.
We were just having a small chat before we start recording, and it's so interesting that we are not so far from each other. So I hope after this conversation, once I get to know you better, we can hopefully see us in person, because I feel that's also good. Because some guests I already know a bit about them. With
Yeah.
you, I of course know a bit about you based on what I saw on LinkedIn and read about you. But it's nice because the listener then gets the whole story and me not making assumptions. So before we get into all of that,
Okay.
Stefan, because what you do today is super interesting. I mean, what you do, some of your work, I can actually, living now in Netherlands, find in the freezer shelves, find in the supermarkets at Albert
Yeah.
Heijn.
Yeah.
Tell me, where did you get into cooking? How did the interest to get into cooking, be a chef, start? Has to be
Okay.
so far from what you do today, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just take you from the very beginning.
Yes, please.
I born in the US in America when I would say probably around 14, 15 years old. I took a job as a dishwasher in a
Mm-hmm.
family-owned Greek restaurant.
Okay.
And I took the job because I needed money. I needed to
Yeah.
work. I wanted to make money for myself. And I started out just washing the dishes. It was a terrible job because, well, it was a very good job, but it was a terrible job at the same time. There was no dishwasher or anything. So it was a three compartment sink. And I literally scraped and scrubbed all the plates and everything else by hand there. But I helped like mopping floors and just from the very beginning, I just cleaned, I washed dishes. And slowly the owner there, the chef there, his name
Mhm.
was Nico. I still speak to him today, actually.
Okay.
He went
Wow.
on to eventually opening a chain of these Greek restaurants in the Omaha, Nebraska area, right? And then I took 2, 3 years. I actually, because I was born in America, so I joined the army in the US. And I did that for a few reasons. One, I wanted to get away. I wanted to get out of living in Omaha, Nebraska. I had this itch and desire to see the world and explore. And the one way I could do that was certainly joining the army, because when I joined the army, I instantly received orders to go to Germany. So
Okay.
I spent 3 years in Germany. I didn't do cooking. I was an engineer in the army there in Germany. But when I came back, moved in after Germany. I moved back to Omaha, Nebraska, and I went to culinary school. And I was able to
Okay.
do that because the army paid my tuition at the time, because they had a deal. You come into the army, we'll pay your college tuition. So
Oh,
that's what I
nice.
did.
Got it.
And in America, the college tuition is very expensive, right? It's
Yeah.
very expensive. We all know that. So I went back to America. I actually didn't even know what I wanted to do, and my wife at the time said, "Well, look, if you become a chef or if you go into hospitality, We could live anywhere in the world. We could move all
True.
over the world. And so I said, well, okay, let me take a cooking class, see how it goes, and we'll take it from there. So I took my first cooking class in university, and it clicked. It was
Nice.
all the way. So I did my degree. I got an associate's degree in culinary arts from Metropolitan Community College in Omaha, Nebraska. Very good school. Went there. And then after I finished my graduation, because I had spent a few years in the army, I was already, I would say, like 23, 24, and
Hmm.
I thought, I feel like I was kind of behind my peers because I didn't have a lot of experience except for in the Greek restaurant. So I we just went for it. I bought a one-way ticket to London,
Okay.
and we jumped on an airplane and we went to London. And spent 10 years there in the end. I spent
Wow.
10 years in the UK. But I started out at the Savoy Hotel in London. And at the time, at the Savoy it still is actually one
It's a
known
legendary
as
place, huh?
it's one of the greatest hotels in the world,
Yeah.
right? It's central London. And at the time, Anton Edelman was the chef de cuisine there, and I worked in the River Room restaurant, right, which now is owned by Gordon Ramsay. But at the time,
Okay.
it was still a very fine dining restaurant. It threw me really for a loop because, I went from sort of working at during school, I worked at a branch of Hilton in Omaha. So I was doing banqueting, I was doing restaurant service, that sort of thing. And then suddenly I'm thrown into this environment of, a school environment and sort of a banqueting environment, straight into a five-star luxury. At the time, I think it had three rosettes restaurant environment. And this was, really a wake-up call for me, because it was the work ethic was different, the culture was totally different. I spoke English, of course, but the British English versus the American English was also quite a challenge at the time. So I spent a year at the Savoy, sort of learning the ways of the UK food scene a bit. And then after the Savoy, I went to a modern European restaurant. At the time, it was called Ditto's, and it was
Mhm.
in Wandsworth. Wandsworth is a section of London. It's where Gordon Ramsay lives, and they also have a lot of nice, really cool restaurants there. It was a modern European restaurant. The chef's name was Callum. He had an amazing background working with people like Pierre Kaufman, Marco Pierre White, you know, uh, Gleneagles Hotel in Scotland. So he had an amazing resume, and I worked side by side with him in the kitchen, in the sauce section, just kind of like just learning how to cook
Mhm.
properly, learning how to do service, but at a higher level of cookery, right? So this was a really good job for me. It really built a lot of my foundations of cooking, right? But then after that, I moved on to hotels. I went back to hotels. So I went to Hilton and I worked at the Hilton Kensington, London Kensington, which is at the time was the second largest hotel in London. And this was the first time I was in a proper brigade, like it was a big kitchen. There was like 30 chefs there. I mean, at the Savoy, there was hundreds of chefs, but
Yeah.
people come and go all the time. You couldn't
True.
keep track of who was who, and yeah, you didn't know anybody. It was just crazy. It was total carnage. But at this Hilton here, it had a couple restaurants, it had room service, it had a busy banqueting thing. And I joined, the team as a chef tournant at the time,
Mhm.
right? Which is a chef that basically just covers everybody's holidays, and also but you have enough skill set where you're sort of chef de partie level, but you're not quite a sous chef, right? You basically moved around to the different sections, and you covered days off, you covered if they needed help, you'd go there, so that was my job. I did that for about 6 months at the Hilton Kensington. The chefs there were great. Well, the chef there specifically, his name is David Atkinson. He ended up moving on to work in some amazing places even after. His rule was he hired no one from the same place. So the
Mhm.
kitchen was
Okay.
full of French, Italian, Spanish, American, Scottish. Everybody was from everywhere, and it was
Mm.
absolutely fantastic. I was promoted to a sous chef. So here I am. I was 25. I was a sous chef in a really nice, good hotel, Hilton Hotel in central London. And I did that for, yeah, 18 months or so. And then after Hilton Kensington, I transferred as a sous chef to Hilton Bath. And then again with Hilton, I transferred to Hilton Cardiff. And this, at the time, was one of Hilton's flagship sites in the UK. It was the chef there named Michael Meason. Again, if you know Hilton, then you'll know Michael Meason. He was sort of like an old school chef, right? He was an amazing craftsman, really good at what he did. And there, I was a sous chef, but I worked in banqueting. So I did all the big
Okay.
events, and it was at a five-star hotel. I did all the head of banqueting. I did all the like big functions and stuff. So we would have 100 three-course plated lunch, and then we'd turn around and do 200 dinner plated
Oh wow.
three-course type thing. And we did all the big events. We did all the big rugby matches. So it was always an exciting time there. And I worked a lot as a chef. That job was probably the one that I wouldn't say it broke me, but it almost did. It was probably 100 hours a week. It was insane. So I spent quite a few years with Hilton, but at 4 different
Hmm.
Hiltons. And after that, because I was always quite strategic with my career at that stage, I knew if I was at the Hilton Cardiff that I could move on to become a head chef in another hotel if I
Right.
just stuck it out and did my time there and learned as much as I could. And that's what I did. After the Hilton Cardiff, I moved on and I became a head chef of a little boutique hotel in Bath. It had a restaurant, it had some room service, it had a bit of banqueting, and it was more about kind of quality and putting systems in place and stuff like that. So I was there about 18 months. It was a good job. And by that stage, I was quite a, solid restaurant slash hotel chef, right?
Yeah.
I was a sous chef in 3 Hiltons. I had been a head chef in my own kitchen, right? In a small little boutique hotel. So I was ready for the next step. So I was really looking around for, at the time, bigger hotels, big restaurants. I was looking at something that would bring my salary level up, but at the same time kind of expand my skill set and all that with a
Of
bigger kitchen.
course.
And then I was headhunted actually. I got a call from a headhunter recruiter saying, listen, you live in Bath and in Glastonbury, which is about 30 minutes or so away. There's a vacancy and they're looking for a skilled chef, a international chef that kind of understands international cuisine and has good skill set with the team building and all this kind of thing, but in a school.
Okay.
And at the time, having trained in, nice places in the
Yeah.
UK also, with the mentality of the chefs at the time,
Of course.
I thought, "School, oh, no, I don't wanna be a school dinner guy,
Yeah.
I'm better than that, I can make, nice food, I don't wanna cook, school dinners."
Yeah. Yeah.
But they reassured me, they said, "Listen, no, that's not, what's going on here. This is a private boarding school, a lot of celebrities send their children to this school, the expectations are extremely high. It's all home-cooked food, you do" what did they it was at the time, they said, "We do 3,000 meals a day there."
Okay.
And it's
Wow.
a
The
team of
scale.
40 cooks. And I thought, wow, okay, this is another game, right? This is another level
Yeah.
of, and you asked me earlier what was kind of a pinnacle moment in my career. And this was probably one of the first ones, right?
Yeah.
Because
Oh wow.
so I went from, I interviewed there. I went and I had a look. I looked at the food. I met the team. I went and had a look. And this was a boarding school, but it was contracted through Compass Group, right? So
Hmm.
Compass had this particular site on their contract. They were looking for a head chef. It wasn't an executive chef at that time, it was a head chef position, and so I interviewed it. I thought, "You know what? I'm gonna go for it, and I'm gonna go for it because it's volume, and if
Yeah.
I can do volume, then now I'm in another league of,"
Yeah.
I was quite strategic about my career. I thought, "If I can do volume, then I have everything. I can do fine dining, I can do, hotels, I can do restaurants, and I can do a function for 5,000 people," and that
Of
was my
course.
goal. So I covered all bases. So I went to this school, this private boarding school, and I ended up being there for 3.5 years.
Oh
It was
wow.
a long time I was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But during that time, I ended up becoming the executive chef of this particular place. But I had a big team, it was a big team of like 30 or 40 cooks at the time. And we were doing consistently 4,000, 3,000, 4,000 meals a day. It was super big. You knew every day it was gonna be busy, right? And we were
Mm-hmm.
doing really nice stuff, right? We were making everything from scratch. We were doing pies. We were doing all the classic British stuff, right? But it was all really nice and homemade. We'd get the vegetables in, we'd process them, we got it, we seared everything, we did everything properly. And Compass noticed and they said, hey, we need support in the education sector within Compass. And we're looking for a development chef, like a regional development chef. We would like somebody with your skill set and your experience to be able to help us lead and manage all our school education sector parts of our business
Okay.
in the southwest of England and Wales. I mean, it was a massive opportunity. It was a small team. I would be tasked with working with the culinary director of education, and he had at that time had a team of like 4 or 5 other development chefs that were based one in London, one in Scotland, one in the south, one in the east. Yeah, so the
Mm-hmm.
team was divided and it was broken up, and but we covered the entire country for the education sector. So again, another pinnacle moment in my career. I left this individual executive chef position and I moved into a regional development chef role with the education sector with Compass. And that was eye-opening because it really showed me what the business was like outside of the kitchen. Yeah. I mean, I was still in the kitchen every day and I was jumping around helping the different sites and I was in there. We were doing training, we were chopping, we were cooking, we were doing functions with them. But at the same time, you began to sort of understand how the corporate world works within the
Yeah.
contract catering. So, whereas before I dealt with just chefs and maybe a GM or a director here and there, but now I was dealing with not only the chefs, but all the political side behind it. So the client at the time, so whoever was in charge of these education facilities, I was dealing with which was our client. I was dealing with the client. I was dealing with also the kitchen teams and the head chefs and everybody that was within that sort of kitchen space. And then also I was dealing with the Compass side of the corporate world. So
Mm-hmm.
everything from headquarters. So it was people like heads of food and food service directors and yeah, sales and marketing and these sort of people, right? Chefs, really high senior chefs that I never even saw before that, made big decisions for these big companies. I was able to kind of slowly start being able to have conversation with these sort of people and kind of understanding what that world looked like, right? So I did that role for, again, probably a year, 18 months or so. And then there was an opportunity and this was still UK based. Then there was an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity that came up for a very similar role, but it was with the healthcare sector, but
Okay.
it was based out of America back into the
Mm-hmm.
US. And so I went for it, right? So
Yeah.
I went
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
it. So I
Sounds very
transferred,
logical.
yeah, so I transferred with Compass UK in Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
and I transferred internationally to Compass US. I was based on the East Coast side of the US, and it was a company called Morrison's. Fantastic company. It's an umbrella within the Compass Group. They
Mm-hmm.
focus on healthcare, so it was hospitals and high-end like senior living facilities, and their specialty was just that. And they were very much focused on trying to provide these healthcare facilities with high-end food because healthcare, of course, as
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows, has a pretty terrible reputation when it
Yeah.
comes to food service, right? But if you look at healthcare now, and even back then, the healthcare industry is very special, especially in America, because it's all privatized. So there's money. So you would go into these cafes in the healthcare facilities, and the cafes would have 5 or 6 different stations, and each station was themed. So you'd have a wok station, you might have a pasta station, you
Okay.
do fresh pizzas, you'd have a grill where you do fresh burgers and stuff. So the food was really good. It was really
Mm-hmm.
good. So that was one focus area that was called retail. We called it retail at the time. The second side of the business was the healthcare food. So the patient food that would
Yeah.
actually go up to the patients that were in the hospital. And this was under a lot of scrutiny because you had to cater for all the different diets. You had to also work with nutritionists to be able to say, hey, look, we have a patient that has just had this surgery and they need this food for nutrients. And so it was a very technical side of cooking. And also the team there was very big. It was, again, it was 30 people. I was based out of one site in Virginia. So I was
Mm-hmm.
basically the executive chef for the flagship site for Morrison's at the time. but also I was a culinary lead for the East Coast, so I would also support all the other hospitals within this group. So it was a patient side, but it also another thing about it was the catering or the hospitality side of the business as well. So you would be doing fine dining dinners, or you would go to the president of the university or the
Okay.
university, the hospital's
Yeah, yeah.
home to do private, little fine dining dinners and stuff. So there was a lot of different kind of really interesting aspects of the healthcare piece of the business because a lot of people just think it's about patient food, but it's not. It's patient food is number one important, but you
Mhm.
also had the retail side, which was really busy and really you have to focus. And then also you have the private dining side. So you're catering for, you might do a private dinner for the hospital's president, and he might be hosting donors that are donating millions of dollars or so to the hospital or something like this. So it was a, it was a, it was a really a real balancing act of trying to facilitate all these
Yeah.
different requirements. So this was quite an interesting chef job. I think that again, if somebody's out there and they're looking at trying to get a chef role where you can
Mhm.
make use of a lot of your skill sets, but have loads of different kind of challenges and different aspects of putting all your experience in one kind of industry. Healthcare is a good one because it's also daytime hours and
Yeah,
normally
no,
weekends
definitely.
off and that sort of thing. So the work-life balance was very good. The salaries are very good. And also, you're able to use really a lot of your skill set. So that was a really great job. So I did that job for, I would say, it must have been around 3 years or so.
Mhm.
And then I left Compass Group and I moved to Sodexo. And Sodexo is also one of the top three contract
Yeah.
catering companies in the world. It's massive. And Sodexo just won the contract. It was a brand new contract for the College of William and Mary. And this was based out of Williamsburg, Virginia. And William and Mary is an Ivy League university. It's a really top end university in the United States. A lot of students, a lot of catering there, and
Mhm.
I was hired on as the culinary director or
Right.
the executive chef of the entire campus.
Mhm.
And my job there, I took the job because it was absolutely at that time would have been the biggest job of my career. It was overlooking all food service and reporting directly to the VP of culinary for that particular contract. And this place was absolutely bonkers, I'll tell you. We had over 200 chefs that worked there. We had six
Wow.
executive chefs. We had like 30 sous chefs. We did over 10,000 meals a day there, right?
Damn.
10,000 meals a day. And it was everything from the student dining. So you had three different dining facilities, and these places were absolutely gigantic. And in each dining facility had 15 different restaurants or stations in each dining facility. So
Mhm.
you can do the math. It was a lot of
Yeah.
moving parts. We had our own farm, so we worked with a farmer, and we had our own farm where we grew our own vegetables, and, I mean, it was just an incredible job. We had bees, we had everything, and then we also we had a stadium. We had a big football stadium there, so we had to
Mhm.
always cater to all the big football matches and stuff there.
Okay.
We also had a massive catering department that was well over, yeah, several million in revenue alone, just that catering business, and we did everything from the big school events where we would have 10,000, we would cater for 10,000 people. We would do
Mhm.
barbecues and all kinds of cool events for like 10,000 up to 10,000 people. But then we would also be at the president of the universities. We would be at
Mhm.
his house doing private events for him and his guests. So again,
Yeah.
it was this sort of multi-skilled chef job where you did everything from fine dining all the way through to big hospitality events, outside catering events for 10,000 people, all the way through to football matches and the daily grind of the student, keeping the students happy because, at the end of the day,
Mhm.
they're the client, they're
Of
the guest,
course.
they're our customer. And we looked after, yeah, 10,000 meals a day with them. And that alone logistically was an absolute mammoth of a task because the students didn't want to see the same old every day, right? So we had,
Mhm.
I think at the time we had a month rotation menu. So you have to think again about this. We had each station and each dining facility menus changing twice a day for a month, every day, seven
Wow.
days a week. So this was a serious operation. Uh, and so anyways, I did that job for 3 years. Again, it was a serious, toll on my stress levels. It gave me a
Can
lot of
imagine,
gray
yeah.
hairs, but it was a fantastic job. It was a
Yeah.
great move. I wouldn't, it was a real pinnacle time in my career that time. So it was great. Met a lot of great people there, learned a lot, and it was just a fantastic, one of my best jobs, I'd say. But then again, and so that would have put me in America for, I would say, 5 or 6 years at that time,
Hmm.
and my wife and I decided at that time we wanna, move back to the EU, we wanted to move back to Europe somewhere, we wanted to go back to the UK, and we wanted to move back and use all the experience that I had gained in America
Hmm.
at that level and move back to the UK. So, I started looking for jobs, and again, an opportunity came up with Sodexo, but in the UK. So
Okay.
I went from Compass US UK to Compass US, Sodexo US to Sodexo UK. So I
Hmm.
moved back to the UK, moved back to London, and I worked at within the food platform team with Sodexo UK and Ireland. So this was a real learning curve for me because it was still considered a chef job. I was
Hmm.
a senior executive development chef, but I overlooked within the team culinary innovation. So
Okay.
some of the chefs there, so we all reported to the culinary director for UK and Ireland, and all of us sat on what they called the food platform team. And the food
Okay.
platform team was basically a big team of people that consisted of things like procurement, marketing. We had buyers, we had senior chefs, we had chefs that were on the team that overlooked different sectors of the business. So somebody might overlook education, somebody would look over government services, B&I, business and industry. It was this kind of, we were all divided into the different categories of where Sodexo at the time, the different segments, we called them, different segments of the industry. So, and we were all divided into our little special categories. But my category was kind of overreaching all of them because I overlooked culinary innovation. So I would
Hmm.
create different concepts, food concepts for the entire organization. So it could
Okay.
be that I would do some kind of cool restaurant concept or some kind of cool street food theme or something that we would create, and we'd work with different suppliers, and we would come together and we would test it in our kitchen, recipe testing and all this sort of thing. We would work with all the different departments like branding, marketing, all these different people to bring together an overall concept that then would be launched into the business. And
Hmm.
those business segments would then pick up those concepts and run them within their sites. So
Mm.
this was a great job. This was a great job, but it also really showed me more than anything how to behave and how to conduct myself in a very corporate environment. And as a chef, this in the early days, I would have never dreamed of doing this, right?
Yeah,
But
it doesn't come natural to
it
us, I believe.
doesn't come natural, right? Because you're in
Yeah,
a
no.
kitchen and you say what you want, your music's loud, you're chopping,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a different world, eh? And to move out of that comfort zone of being around your peers and having no filter, being able to really be
Mm.
yourself, but doing something that all of us love, and that's cooking, to step
But they're
out of
also
that.
being measured by different things, right? Not just the cooking. They are like measuring your job or your success criteria by much different scales than just your cooking skills, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you have to sort of, there's that, it's going from being a chef
Mm.
and still being a chef, but moving into a different industry that's very unfamiliar to you because as a chef, whether you're a commie chef or you're an executive chef, there's this level of kitchen comfort, right? You get into the
Hmm.
kitchen and it's your zen, yeah, your safe place. You can create, you can cook, you can do things. You're in charge of a space. But when you move out of that and you go into a corporate environment where you're working with people or you're working with decision makers that is in a food business but have never been a chef themselves, and you have to say convince or use your expertise as a chef to try to get other people within the business to understand whether it's logistics or understand pain points of customers or
Hmm.
understand the way kitchens work and why we can do something and why we can't do something and all these sort of things. That's a challenge, eh? That's a challenge. But if you can crack that, then you have a really good chance of really getting into some kind of corporate environment where you're using your chef skills, but in different ways. And that's the key. And that's where you see a lot of chefs that work for big either manufacturing companies or big companies like Compass Group, where you're the VP of culinary or you're the
Hmm.
culinary director for a big business. Usually these guys have got really great kitchen experience. They've come through the ranks, they understand how kitchens work, and then they've used that skill set, but they've added additional skill set, like leadership, like stakeholder management, like how to do presentations, how to get your knowledge across in another way to a business, but at more of a senior level. If you can learn that and go down that direction, you've got a good future ahead of you,
Yeah.
for sure.
And just because like, you touched that point, I want to understand how does your relationship change, Stefan? Because I mean, the way you started your career, I mean, it's a great transformation because you've been very selective of what skill you want to learn or where you want to be or what could add on to what you already have. But does your relationship with cooking also change through these roles on how you relate to cooking as a profession?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, for sure. I mean, because you don't look at it from a day-to-day process anymore, right? You're not
Hmm.
in the kitchen chopping, running, doing service. That's gone. And if you're not careful, you become stagnant and you can become what we call in the business like kind of a like a busted burnout, like, you
Yeah.
you become you're past your sale by date, right? You become
Hmm.
yeah, and you've seen them. You see these
Yeah.
chefs, right? And they had a great career, but then their career ended. They took another career path like I've done and like what you have done, but then they never some of them, not all, but the ones that are very successful continue to do this, but you must still research, read, watch what's going
Hmm.
on, still try to understand what's going on in the business, and still try to get in the kitchen occasionally and keep your skill set moving. Because if you don't, what'll happen is you'll lose touch of this. You'll still be
Yeah.
able to have the banter and hey, chef, and all this kind of stuff whenever you go to kitchens, but you don't want to be the guy that was a chef a long time ago and now he's a corporate guy
Hmm.
and he's lost total touch of it. So to answer your question, can certainly your perception of food and how the business works can be stuck in time if you don't keep evolving and keep trying to like better yourself and learn and keep trying to get better. If it's easy to lose touch of it, and then you
Definitely.
end up in a corporate world and you're talking about what you did 10 years ago, but
Right.
the kitchens have evolved and everything has changed, and it's important that you just stay on top of that, right? That's really important.
Mm.
Yeah. But kind of going to what you asked me, at that stage of my career, I thought, this is really good what I'm doing. And I've been out of the kitchen now for 2 years because in my previous role in America, even though I was a regional sort of lead, I still was in the kitchen every day.
Okay.
I was still cooking. I was still side by side with all the chefs. With Sodexo, I spent 2 years out of the kitchen. I was still in kitchens, but it was more of a advisory consultancy sort of way. I would
Right.
go, I would look, I would advise, and I'd leave. I wouldn't cook
Hmm.
anything. I wasn't doing. So after those 2 years, I started to feel a bit like what I just mentioned. I started to feel, ooh, am I? Was this the right move? I had this sort of
Hmm.
itch to get back into being a chef again. I had this kind of desire. Maybe it was punishing myself. I don't know what it is, but I thought I need to be a chef again. I need to go back and being a chef. So I left my corporate role doing concept innovation for Sodexo. I left the UK and I moved to Germany. I
Okay.
moved to southern Germany and I became an executive head chef in a resort.
Mhm.
And so to some degree you could say, "Chef, you got to a corporate top level job. Why did you
Mm.
then go back to being a chef?" I did this because I felt like I wanted to stay abreast of what was going on. Because I
Mhm.
thought I had this job, so I can always have it again. Like I feel like,
Exactly.
and if anybody asked me, why did you leave corporate? I could say, you know why? Because I wanted to stay connected. I wanted to
Yeah.
understand what was still going on. I wanted to keep relevant. I wanted
Mhm.
to keep, on trend. I wanted to make sure that I was still a chef, that I could still
Mhm.
walk the walk and talk the talk, right? I wanted to be able to get in a kitchen and still produce the goods. So I left the corporate world. I went straight back into a kitchen as an executive head chef in a big resort. We had 3 restaurants, we had banqueting, we had room service, all that stuff, multi-site place, a team of 25 or so. And I put a chef's hat on and I grabbed my knives and I got my head down and I got on with it. And I did that role. In the end, it was 3.5 years. And the reason why I stuck it out for quite a while is during COVID as well. So that, you
Of course. Yeah.
take a year out of that, right? But I was lucky to stay employed. But I did this job. I made a lot of changes. We had a restaurant refurb, all this kind of stuff. So I felt as I was, yeah, I was like, okay, I proved to myself I could still be a chef then. Now, during this time, because I was already I knew the kitchens. I was a good manager. I was able to delegate. I was able to task. So during this time and during COVID, I actually then went back to university and I got my
Okay.
bachelor's degree in food and beverage entrepreneurship with Johnson and Wales online.
Hmm.
And this was a fantastic thing for me to do at that point in time in my career. I did that, and I also got involved with World Chefs, the World Chef Society, a global organization. And I thought, I'm going to apply for the Master Chef certification because started reading it and researching it, and I thought, I can do this, right? So, long story short, during that time as well, having been in the business 20, 25 years, I applied and received my certified master chef designation through World Chef. So that was really good.
Hmm.
So during that time, when I was at this resort, I got my bachelor's degree and I got my master chef certification. So then I was there and then I thought, this is great, but I need to go back into the corporate world again because I thought, you know what? I'm a chef. I've done it. I understand it. I spent over 20 years in kitchens. I'm a master chef. I've got a degree. I've done all these things. I've got certifications. I feel like I can now properly take what I learned in kitchens and work that into other businesses. So I was headhunted again. I
Hmm.
had a recruiter reach out to me and say, "Hey, there's a role. It's based in the Netherlands. It's right up your street. We think that you will absolutely love it." And that's with Avico. And Avico is a potato manufacturing company. It's a massive organization. It's a global company. They're in over 110 countries. They have 7 factories all over the world and they sell potatoes, fries, and different potato products and snacks. Now, at the time, I thought I was kind of avoiding the, the recruiter because I thought, oh, this is a risky move because the role also wasn't head of this or director of that. It was a senior culinary product developer role. And I thought, what is that?
Yeah.
So when I spoke to but it sat on the global innovation team within
Okay.
the company, and I thought, okay, that sounds good. And then the hiring manager, I had an interview with him. Absolutely fantastic guy. And he was a previous chef as well. So he was the
Okay.
global head of innovation. He had chef experience, so he understood where I came from. And
Hmm.
the other thing he said to me was, look, a product developer is someone who takes products and develops them. So you learn that process and that whole entire processing from what goes on in your mind. So what you think about as far as a new product is concerned and that whole process. So from what goes on in your head all the way through what they call the innovation funnel, all the way through
Hmm.
to you seeing it in the supermarket on the shelves. It was about learning that entire process from I have a great idea and how it works through an organization, through all the different departments, through all the different stakeholders within an organization that even though it's a food company, there's no chefs. There was no not there's a few chefs that but there's it wasn't chef background people. It was people
Hmm.
that perhaps a project manager that before the food business they worked in, I don't know, the clothing industry or something. So
Of course.
that was a very interesting first year and a half or so with Avico because my whole role was about learning that innovation process from idealization all the way through to the items being there visible on shelving. So this was a very interesting time. And I'm still with Abico now.
Mhm.
My role is really developing now into more than just the product development side. It's really now about also developing relationships with end users or chefs and connecting them with Abico. So that is
Okay.
done through things like the World Chefs Organization. It's
Mhm.
done through different partnerships with different equipment companies, all this kind of stuff. So it's about bringing what I know as a chef into the Avico organization to help them not only create products, but become a total solution provider for all of our customers and that entire process. So it's a totally different job. It's a totally
Yeah,
different job,
yeah, yeah.
but at the same time, I'm still using every day my chef skills to be able to influence an organization in a way that helps everybody involved, not only the organization, but also people like me that were chefs in kitchens and need help because the industry is certainly changing. And when I mean need help is help from suppliers or help from Abico to be able to not only have a good product that you can trust and rely on, but all the processes and all the pain points that go along with it. So whether that's
Yeah.
recipes, whether that's programming our cooking times in ovens for them, it's all sorts of stuff, but it's still food and it's still in the industry and it's yeah, it's a great job.
No, it's definitely, and I think what you said about yourself, then when you felt the need after Sodexo to go to Germany and find that relevance, as you called it, to be relevant to the food industry, and I think that's the role. Interestingly enough, is the other way around now because I feel what chefs do in a food company like yours, for example, where the company, of course, we there's no way somebody joining the company will know more than what a potential of a potato is, or how it has to be developed, or how their ways of doing things are. But I think they always miss context, which chefs can provide, because chefs understand not just the customer who's going to buy the products, but also the consumer, the end consumer, who's going to, how they're going to relate with it, how they're going to interact with it, and then how can you optimize,
Yeah,
be it from like instructions on the packet, or how the product has to be designed, or how it fits into the gadget they're using to finally be it an air fryer or whatever that is. I feel
yeah.
that's super interesting for me. But for you, in your role today, like just to explain us, like with your evolution on starting, seeing what Avico was doing, and today what you do, what would you say for somebody who wants to picture what Stefan's? Because I think you've given us a very good background into different aspects of chef life that you've lived. Because I feel every episode I have a guest who's done one aspect of it, but you've done so many aspects of it. So today's job, if somebody wants to understand, what do you say your week look like? Because I think your days are very different, but what a week or 2 week looks like for a chef like you in Avico.
Yeah. Okay. So because I fall within the global innovation team, I
Hmm.
work in sort of a bit of a triangle. And my triangle is this: marketing, innovation, sales. And in the middle, there's lots of opportunity. So a typical week for me would be, well, I'll give you my last week. Last week I flew to, so I'm based in the Netherlands. I flew to London last week and I met with a big UK equipment supplier and
Hmm.
I met with them for the day. I went to their site, I looked at all their equipment, and we spent the entire day working out how our products and their equipment can collaborate
Hmm.
to not only about sharing customers, but about how do we make both brands visible in a collaborative way that helps our customers, both sides, become more successful and providing them with total solutions. So that was like a Monday. And I flew out in the morning and I flew back the next morning. So it was a
Yeah.
24-hour trip. The day after that, I had already, and again, my agenda is planned 4 months in advance.
Yeah.
So I already know what I'm doing in 3 months' time.
Hmm.
So the next day, already we had already organized to have a product innovation lunch internally for senior leadership and also for sales marketing people, where we basically created this product lunch presentation for these people in order to keep them abreast on trends that are happening, what other people are doing across the world with
Hmm.
potatoes, but taking those trends and taking Avico products and mashing them together and working out, displaying different food dishes and different kind of like concepts, but based on using our products.
All right.
And so that was a great lunch because we had a film, we had pictures happening. We had a big display of everything that we're doing and all the trends, and we were able to talk to everybody about it. And then everybody just kind of ate and tucked in and went for it. Then I spent a lot of time because we're partners with World Chefs. So what we do is we have exclusivity to so now what's coming up is the World Chefs Congress in Wales, and that's
Mm.
happening in
Right.
May. And we as a company have a food booth at the Congress in the competition arena at the World Chess Village. And so, really, those 2 days for me were spent calling, organizing the menus on what we're going to do out of the food truck, speaking to the cooks that are going to be on the food truck, ordering them chef jackets, speaking to the logistics people on site to make sure that the food truck comes at this time and it goes there and here and then making sure
Yeah.
the products get there. So the overall organization, but then also talking with the internal global team with Avico on strategic ways on how we will benefit from participating at the World Chess, but from a Avico perspective, right? So what is the plan? What is the message that we're going to deliver to all the people that are at the World Chess Congress? And what do we want from them? What do we want to extract strategically from those attendees of that conference? And what do we want to share with them so they know who we are? So it's about brand positioning, brand awareness. It's about sharing our products with customers, not from a sales point of view, even though that kind of is a natural progression into what happens, but it's about relating with chefs in a way that they understand, but also building relationships with them while we're there and how we take that as an organization, take that information, and then how do we feed that back into Avico so that we can provide better services and better total solutions for customers. So it's that whole piece. And also, how do we create content? How do we communicate to the world that we were there and this is what we did and here was the result? And so that's a it's a big ask. It's a
Yeah.
big project, and also in this kind of world, you work out in projects. So you have a lot of different projects, and some of them are quick projects, and they're it's just a matter of a couple of days and it's done. And then there's some projects that take years. But this World Chess project, I've been working on this probably for 6 months.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of logistical things to think about from a chef's perspective, but also from my role at Avico from a global platform, what that looks like. Uh,
Yeah, that's a complex set of activities, right? I mean, Stefan, if you just that's what I'm saying, that the moment I feel the I think the underexposed environment now is that, at least with the podcast or with what we see on LinkedIn, I'm trying to push that people know more about these roles exist, but then these roles, the way they are at least titled or how the job descriptions are, it's so limited on what your day to day looks like. So for me, that's very interesting. So more people listen about how you need to develop these soft skills. So maybe if somebody is pitching themselves to be in a career like yours in, say, the next 8 to 10 years, they need to build those soft skills. They need to build those skills to be able to speak the language that marketing speaks, and scales, like in this triangle of yours. You
yes.
are, of course, a chef, but you need to speak their language. If not, you could be speaking the same stuff but be so different from each other. And this
Yeah.
connects to my next question, which is about, because you have worked in hospitals, schools, hotels, restaurants, resorts, and when you look back at the industry today on how it is today, do you think that we are too narrow in how we define success for chefs? How do you see the success criteria for chefs today? Has it changed for you? And does the industry really need to redefine, especially in these gatherings like the World Association of Chefs? What would you say has to change with this?
I think the industry certainly has changed a great deal. Really, I started seeing this about 10 years ago, a bit of a
Hmm.
shift in the change. But I would say more recently, I would say since COVID, since the pandemic, the industry has certainly shifted. There's no doubt about it. The statistics are there, but you can physically see it. You can feel it. The industry's changed in several different ways. One is do more with less. So the expectation hasn't moved. It's still high for all chefs, but your resources and your tools to do those things have reduced. The other thing I think that has really, really shifted in the industry, and I think for the better as well, is the awareness within the industry about mental health. I think
Yeah.
that there was this expectation, and there still is to some degree because you still see it in the news today, right? You still see it in the
Yeah.
news today. And it is about the way not only people in the industry are treated, but it's the way the expectations of the work. Back in my day, like in the UK and in America, as a chef, right? The expectation was that you're on or you're off. There's no, okay, you work from 6 to 2, and then you'll have 2 days off. Some jobs, if you're lucky, yes, like the healthcare, that was really good for that sort of thing. Or if you're a cook, and these are things that you can work shifts. But I think the expectation where the job just has to get done,
Hmm.
regardless of holidays, your family, girlfriend, boyfriend, none of that to some degree was taken into account. It was just, look, you need to work from 8 to 10. The job has to get done, and you have one out sick. So tough. Like, get on
Yeah.
with it, right? Nobody had to say that to a chef, but I think a chef naturally inside yourself already has this high mentality and work ethic of getting the job done because that's what we do, regardless of anything. It's like the show must go on no matter what. But I think what's happened is that, especially with the younger generations coming into the business, people, and since COVID especially, the pinnacle is turned. People don't look at being a chef and say, "Oh yeah, I want to work 100 hours a week
Mm.
for under minimum wage and at all costs." That's the mentality has definitely shifted, but also the awareness that that's not right. Why
Yeah.
is it like that? I think people are looking in the mirror now and saying, I just missed the last 20 Christmases. Why?
Yeah.
Why did I do that? I wouldn't say there's a regret, but I think there's
Mhm.
certainly more of an awareness of people saying, actually, I'm not going to work Christmas
Mm.
because it's Christmas, right? For
Yeah.
example, or my
Yeah. Yeah.
birthday or my wife's anniversary or whatever. And also the stress levels and projects like the Burnt Chef project, for
Mhm.
example, you have all these organizations that are taking mental health within the industry and saying, hey, look, we need to look at this or else there won't be an industry in 50 years time, right? So I think that those two things, those have caused a major shift in the industry where the industry has to really look itself in the mirror and we need to make changes because we can't continue sustaining the way it is at the moment. It's just not sustainable.
100%. Stefan, couldn't agree more. And I feel COVID gave that pause where we could reflect because I feel most of these things have been obvious, but there's never been like a real reflection moment because it's like, okay, let's just do it because it works. Because if we stop, we'll be even more behind. So I feel
Yeah.
COVID gave that breather, and of course, we have a great opportunity with the younger generation who are more self-aware, who are more, I think, proactive at voicing these things, and at the same time, these structures that what Chris is growing with Burn Chef and others are growing at the same time. So I think it's a very positive thing to look at. I feel there's a lot of tension because people looking at also frustrated, like why is it? And as you said, like regret shouldn't be the only factor being focused on, but how can we like move on from this, right? But
Yeah.
before I let you go, Stephanie, I think you're in a great position to tell us for anybody listening who feels like currently they fit into a kitchen, currently they think, okay, this is where I'm going to build my skills as you did, but it doesn't align with the goals I have for myself, whether it is monetary or family life or moving somewhere else. What advice would you give them if say they have an idea, okay, this could be where I could work in a different context with my kitchen skills? What
Yeah.
would you tell them the first move they could do?
The first thing to do, definitely do your homework, do your research, but don't be scared to do it. Don't be scared to make the move because if you're in a kitchen now, you can always go back to a kitchen, eh? You
Yeah.
can always go back, but you won't move forward unless you take that step. You have to go for it. And a bit of advice I would give, and that I've learned in my career over time, and maybe a little late, and I wish I would have done it sooner, is everywhere you work, build really good relationships with your colleagues because you never know when
Yeah.
you'll see them again. There's some colleagues that I never thought of and never thought
Yeah.
I'd see again, didn't even think about them. And then 10 years later, I bump into them. And then after chatting, we have that instant connection because we work together. But also, this person suddenly is valuable to me because they have something that can help me, or I can help them, or we can connect and do something together that will help both of us. So I think, it's really important to build good relationships because you just never know when you'll meet them again. And also, when you get to an organization like going into what I've done, just be curious and don't be scared to ask questions and navigate your way on how the organization works, because it will be unfamiliar and it will be a little scary because it's outside your comfort zone, but that's okay. Being uncomfortable is probably to your advantage. Look at it as a superpower, and keeps you on your toes and keeps you moving forward and being curious, and just, yeah, just go for it. Just go for it.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Stefan. I couldn't have summed it up better. I feel what you've said about, yeah, reaching out or like, and like just making these moves, because I think a lot of us underestimate how translatable kitchen skills are and how much of a big advantage it is to have a profession or a skill set that you can fall back on, because it will always be in demand. There'll be highs and lows, but in some format, if you're flexible, you'll have a job
Yeah.
that appreciates those skills.
Yeah.
How much ever you pivot, I can always come back to that. So thank you so much for that, Stefan. It's been a great conversation. I feel you've not just like, you've showed us that it's not about, if you leave kitchens, if you leave restaurants, it's not just leaving cooking. It doesn't really mean that you're leaving cooking, but you are redefining how that could be purposeful in a different sense of the food system. So thank you so much for
Absolutely.
this, and
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Thank you.